Today, we're going to look at the old Mazdaspeed 3, compare it to its rivals, then look where the rivals have come to then work out the specs of what the Mazdaspeed 3 would have been if it was released today, so we can see how impressive this car really was. You'll get the idea. Let's just go into the video. Let's go with this. So what am I talking about? So we're going to get some vital performance numbers of cars from its time and then see how much faster or slower the Speed 3 was in comparison, then look at the modern versions of those said cars, use that comparison rate to then work out what a brand new Speed 3, if it was put out today, would make. So let's go. So of course we'll start out with our 2007 Gen Mazdaspeed 3. What cars are we going to compare it to? Well, I wanted to use some cars that had a similar power to it and that were rivals. Obviously, we have to look at a GTI or an ST. I've decided to use the ST simply because at the time, its power was more similar to the Speed 3. Also, I had to use some sort of Golf, but I worked out that the Golf R of the time had closer amount of power. It had 250 horsepower, whereas the GTI only had 200. Next up, I decided to pick a car that demonstrates what these hot hatches can do nowadays, to make it a little harder. So we're going to compare the Civic Type R of the time to the brand new Civic Type R. Also, a car I wanted to choose was one that was renowned for the time, another hot hatch that was very similar and people loved it, the Megane RS. So let's get talking about how much power the new Speed 3 would have. Using all those numbers and data, I worked out that the Speed 3 now, if it was released today, would have 354 horsepower. That's right in line with the Focus RS. And that kind of goes to point, because remember, it always had a lot more power than the ST and the GTI, but not as much as something crazy like a RS3. And that's what's happened here. It's got a lot more than an ST or a GTI, about 270, but the new RS3's got, 400 horsepower, while the S3 will have about 333. And this thing, the Speed 3, will have 354. Now let's talk about torque. The Speed 3 always was a really torquey car, and using these four other cars, I've worked out that the new Speed 3 would have 388 pound-feet of torque, which is an incredible number. Think about it, the Audi R8 V10 from 2009 had 391 pound-feet. The V10 BMW M5 put out 387 pound-feet. It's a really impressive number. And that's what it was in the time, because it was front-wheel drive in Mazda. Front-wheel drive, a lot of torque through the front wheels, wasn't a good idea. And now we have to talk about weight. The Speed 3 was a little bit more porky than most other cars, because remember it had that 2.3 turbo engine. It also had a really nice interior with the Bose sound system, and that hasn't let it down. That weighs now 1,488 kgs. And this is of course curb weight, and yeah, that's pretty heavy. That's about the same weight as an Evo 10. And now, what does power and torque make with the weight? Well, we have to now talk about the 0 to 100 time. Now, I think we can all agree, if the Mazdaspeed 3 was released today as it was back in its day, it would in fact have all-wheel drive. The new Mazda 3 comes with all-wheel drive. And with the crazy numbers we've just heard, you bet it better be all-wheel drive. Especially if it's got to weigh that much. So here's the thing, now we should only really be looking at cars that switch from front wheel drive to four wheel drive, because obviously four wheel drive is going to give you a much better launch. So what was another front wheel drive hot hatch at the time that then switched to four wheel drive now? Ford Focus RS. Now obviously using one car isn't enough, so I chose to also use the Golf R just because the Mark V four-wheel drive system wasn't really that good and therefore its launch wasn't that good, but nowadays the Mark 7 Golf R hull deck system is a legend and it therefore has a really good launch. So front-wheel drive to all-wheel drive means bad launch to good launch, and this is also bad launch to good launch, so I thought it was the most suitable. Using this, we've worked out that the Speed 3 would go from 0 to 100 in 4.45 seconds. That's the slightest bit faster than an E90 M3 and the Evo 10 and the Focus RS. That is a really good launch. And remember, that heavy weight is actually helping it with its launch, because it's got a lot of grip, much like the Nissan GTR and all the stupid Teslas. So what happens once you reach 100, you'll probably most likely be thinking about that quarter-mile time. Now, quarter-mile is less about launching and quite a bit about that really roaring of the car. That really doesn't make sense. But anyways, what I mean is, the Speed 3 would have a really bad launch being front wheel drive, but it still does the quarter mile at the same time as a 4-wheel drive Evo 7 or an RX-7. So I thought we'd do with this most similar amount of power, so I selected to use the ST, the Golf R, the Civic Type R, and the Focus RS. As in we've got both the Fords, one of which, just like the Speed 3, will go from front wheel drive to 4-wheel drive, a Golf R that's went from bad launch to good launch, and that modern day hero, that Civic Type R. And what we've worked out is, it'll do the quarter mile in just 12.9 seconds. So that is faster than the Focus RS. It's about the same time as a Mark 7 Golf R.
Oh, good start, forward drive traction. Porsche is quick though.
It's faster than an A45 AMG, and do you remember that CS400 STI, the 400 horsepower STI? Faster than that. But that kind of surprised me, because a Mark 7 Golf R does the quarter mile in 12.9 seconds, but that has a lot less power, a lot less torque, though I guess it is a bit lighter. That really shows what's really amazing about those Golf R launches. And going on from that, we have to talk about track time. I want to be really fair with this, well, like everything else I guess. And the only time I could find the tracks that everyone knows and loves, i.e. Top Gear Test Track, Laguna Seca and the Nürburgring, was the Nürburgring for the Golf R, Megane RS. The ST times weren't available, Civic Type R times nope, and with that I worked out that the Speed 3 would do the Nürburgring lap in 8:25. That's very respectable. A Focus RS does in about the same amount of time. So if it was released today, the Speed 3, we would have a 354 horsepower, 388 pound-feet of torque, 4-wheel drive, weighing 1,488 kgs, that will spend it from 0 to 100 in 4.45 seconds, do the quarter mile in 12.9, and have a Nürburgring lap of 8:25. Shout out Mazda, prove me you can do this. Because that is a very impressive car. Of course it won't happen though, because even going from Gen 1 to Gen 2, they just carried over the same exact car. If you did enjoy, thank you so much for watching, drop a like, and see you next time.
Went so fast, the A35.